Imagine stepping into an arena. You are asked to play a game where the rules were written thousands of years ago by people who never even envisioned you being there.
Right, they had no concept of you.
Exactly. You are handed a uniform that just does not fit, and you are judged by a scoreboard that completely ignores your particular strengths. You are running the plays, you are scoring the points, but something deep inside you feels entirely out of alignment.
It is an exercise in profound disorientation. I mean, you might be participating, maybe even achieving or winning the game by societal standards, but beneath the surface, there is this persistent, quiet crisis of identity.
Yes, that feeling of being successful but completely alienated from your own nature.
And that feeling of alienation, well, it's not a personal failure on your part. It was a historical inheritance. The models of success, the very archetypes of victory we use today, they were simply not designed with your fundamental nature in mind.
Which brings us to the core of our discussion. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are embarking on a truly transformative mission. We are opening the pages of Joseph Campbell's extensive work, Goddesses, Mysteries of the Feminine Divine, which was edited by Saffron Rossi.
It is a phenomenal collection.
It really is. And our goal today is ambitious. We are going to trace the archetype of the divine feminine across the vast expanse of human history. We are starting in the dark, echoing caves of the Paleolithic era and going all the way to the romantic poetry of the Middle Ages.
And we really need to establish immediately why this matters to you, the listener, right at this very moment. Because we are not just cataloging ancient pottery here.
Yeah, not at all.
Modern society is, as Campbell aptly described it, in a state of free fall into the future. Women have entered these highly competitive spheres, arenas of individual achievement that were, for millennia, traditionally reserved for men.
Right, the corporate world, politics, academia.
Exactly. But they have done so without feminine mythological models to guide them.
Wait, I want to pause on that because it feels absolutely crucial. Are you saying we have the societal permission to achieve, but we essentially lack the psychological blueprints for what female achievement actually looks like?
That is the core issue, yes. This absence leads to a profound identity crisis.
Yeah.
And it's not just for women, but for men as well, who are, navigating these uncharted waters right alongside them.
Because the whole dynamic shifts.
Exactly. We are currently the ancestors of tomorrow. We are the ones tasked with creating the new myths that will guide future generations. But we cannot do that if we do not understand what was lost, how it was taken, and ultimately how we might reclaim it.
So to understand where we are going, we absolutely must go back to the beginning. We have to return to the ancient caves of our hunter-gatherer ancestors. And Campbell makes this fascinating, almost humorous observation about our modern dilemma to set the stage.
Oh, the vacuum cleaner point.
Yes. He notes that modern women have been alleviated from traditional domestic ties, largely as the result of the male invention of the vacuum cleaner and other household technologies.
It is a brilliant bit of irony, really. I mean, technology liberated women from the hearth, but it thrusts them into a corporate industrial world of individual achievement that is completely lacking in female archetypes.
So let us look at the archetypes we used to have. Back in the Paleolithic era, Campbell outlines a stark division between male magic and female magic, and I found this distinction incredibly illuminating.
It is foundational to everything that comes later.
Right. So male magic, he argues, was inherently role-based. It was about performing a specific function. It was about putting on a mask.
We see this vividly in the cave art of Les Trois Frères in France. There is this famous figure known as the sorcerer.
Right, the one on the antlers?
Yes, exactly. He's depicted wearing animal skins, the ears of a wolf, the antlers of a stag, the tail of a horse. He's performing an act. He is putting on a persona to mediate between the human tribe and the animal world.
So he's stepping into a role.
Precisely. Male power, in this context, is something you acquire. It is a status you achieve through a specific action.
But female magic, conversely, was viewed as inherent to the body. It was completely natural. It was the profoundly mystical ability to simply give life. A woman did not need to put on antlers to perform a miracle because her own biology was the miracle.
Think about the absolute awe that must have inspired in early humans. I mean, a woman bleeds in rhythm with the moon, yet she does not die. She produces another human being from her own body.
And then produces food for that child from her own body.
Yes, she was seen as the living, breathing manifestation of the earth itself.
Okay, hold on. I need to push back here slightly, or at least ask for clarification. We look at these ancient caves, these deep subterranean spaces where they painted these images, and we often think of them just as shelters from the cold, right?
That is the common misconception, yes.
But Campbell suggests they were something much deeper. Were these caves essentially the first cathedrals? Were early humans actually performing a highly sophisticated psychological surgery to birth a spiritual consciousness out of biological instinct?
They absolutely were. You see, they were not living in the deep caves. The living quarters were at the mouths of the caves, where the light actually reached.
Oh, so the deep parts were separate.
Entirely. The deep, pitch-black, terrifying recesses were strictly ceremonial. They symbolized the womb of the Earth Mother.
So a boy going into the deep cave is literally re-entering the womb.
Figuratively and psychologically, yes.
Yeah.
And the rituals were intense. They were designed to induce terror and absolute awe. Boys were taken away from their mothers, which is a traumatic separation in itself.
I can imagine.
And they were led deep into these freezing, sensory-deprived environments. The psychological objective was very clear. The boy was to die to his childhood.
Wow.
He was to realize that while he was born physically of his biological mother, he must now be reborn spiritually of the cosmic mother. He was being initiated into a spiritual existence, realizing his direct connection to the broader universe.
That sets up a profound foundation for how they viewed the world. And it brings to mind one of the most powerful myths Campbell shares from these hunter-gatherer societies, the story of the Buffalo Maiden.
That is a devastatingly beautiful myth.
It really is. And this story is crucial because it perfectly illustrates the difference between masculine separation and feminine unification. Let me lay out the narrative for the listener.
Please do.
The story tells of a family of Native American hunters. The men have slaughtered a massive herd of buffalo. They've taken what they need, but the work is overwhelming, so they leave a young girl behind to finish the arduous task of preparing the meat, treating the hides, all of it.
It is an impossible amount of labor for one person.
Exactly. So the girl, freezing, exhausted, and completely overwhelmed by the sheer scale of death around her, she cries out. She says that if the buffalo will only help her, she will marry one of them.
It is a cry of desperation, yes, but it is also a recognition of a relationship. And to her astonishment, a massive buffalo approaches.
He actually responds.
He does. He completes the work, clearing the overwhelming burden, but then he holds her to her promise. He takes her away to live with the herd.
Right. And her father eventually discovers she's missing. He tracks her to the buffalo herd. He attempts a rescue, sneaking in while the great buffalo is sleeping. But the buffalo wakes up.
He smells the presence of an intruder, a hunter.
Yes, and the entire herd rises up and tramples the father to death, obliterating his body entirely.
Now, the girl is understandably heartbroken. She sits in the dirt and weeps for her father. But the buffalo, representing the harsh, reciprocal reality of nature, points out the human hypocrisy.
This is the part that gave me chills.
He says to her, "You cry for your father, but what about our fathers, our mothers, our children that your people have slaughtered?"
That is a staggering moment of empathy demanded by nature. Just incredible. But the girl continues to mourn. So finally the buffalo tells her that if she can bring her father back to life, she may go free.
And she does.
She does. Using a tiny fragment of her father's bone she finds in the dirt, the assistance of a magpie, her own blanket, and a magical song, she miraculously resurrects him.
And the conclusion of this myth is where the profound philosophical shift occurs. The buffalo are so astounded by her ability to resurrect life that they offer a pact. They do not attack again.
They propose an alliance.
Exactly. They say, if you will do this for us, if you'll dance this dance and bring back our fallen, we will have a covenant with you.
So the masculine approach, represented by the hunters, was simply to kill, take, and leave. It is extraction. But the feminine principle, represented by the girl, unites the opposites.
She unites the animal and the human.
Yes, the hunter and the hunted, life and death, all through a deep, empathetic compassion.
She establishes a reciprocal, spiritual relationship with nature. In this paradigm, humanity is not dominant over the earth. Humanity is in a sacred dialogue with it. The goddess in this era was not merely a fertility idol to be worshipped. She was a boundary of the universe itself.
She encompassed both the giving of life and the taking of it.
Precisely.
But that hunter-gatherer equilibrium was fundamentally fragile, because the moment humans realized they did not have to wait for the earth to offer up food that they could force its hand by planting seeds, the entire psychological dynamic flipped.
We stopped being guests of nature and started trying to manage it.
Which initiates the agrarian shift. And this is arguably the most monumental turning point in human history. With the rise of agriculture, biological and societal authority shifted even more heavily toward the feminine.
It became deeply entrenched
But why is that? Why does planting seeds elevate the feminine archetype?
because the mechanics of agriculture directly mirror the mechanics of the female body. The magic of the earth, taking a dead seed, burying it in the dark soil, and bringing forth crops, and the magic of women bringing forth life from the dark womb became entirely synonymous.
They were seen as the exact same process.
Yes, both were seen as the ultimate source of nurturing, transformation, and sustenance.
We see the physical evidence of this absolute reverence in the ancient city of Çatalhöyük in Anatolia, dating back to 7,000 years before Christ. The imagery unearthed there is just staggering.
It is incredibly rich.
We find statues of the goddess, and she is rarely alone. She's often flanked by powerful animals. She's supported by lions, which symbolize the sun and its radiant, fierce power, and she gives birth to bulls, which symbolize the moon and the concept of sacrifice.
And notice the inversion of the gender roles we are accustomed to today. In these goddess mythologies, the sun, representing constant, radiant, nurturing heat, is female.
Right, whereas we usually think of the sun god as male.
Exactly. And the moon, which visibly dies and is reborn every month in the sky, represents the masculine principle. The masculine is constantly dying and being reborn from the sun's eternal fire.
That brings up a critical point. In the hunter-gatherer era, death was a taking. An animal died so you could live, but in the agrarian era, death becomes a giving. A seed must be buried. It must die to its original form to sprout and feed the village.
Yes, the seed sacrifices itself.
And this introduces one of the most challenging concepts in Campbell's work, the myth of the sacrifice deity.
Challenging is definitely the right word. Modern sensibilities often recoil at these stories.
It can be quite gruesome.
They are. A perfect example is the myth of Hanwell from the Pacific Islands. The myth posits an era before time, before differentiation, where a divine maiden exists. But to create the world as we know it, she is murdered.
Just outright murdered by her community.
Yes. Her body is chopped into pieces and buried in the earth. And from those buried, severed fragments of her divine body grow the root crops, the yams, the taro that sustain human life.
Wait, let me make sure I am grasping the underlying logic here. Why does the goddess have to be chopped up? I mean, she's divine. Why cannot she just magically conjure the food?
Because the myth is explaining the mechanics of agriculture and human existence. To a planting culture, life feeds on life. You do not get the harvest without breaking the earth, without cutting the plant.
You have to reap to sow.
Exactly. Death is what brings differentiation into the world. It separates male from female, day from night, and it literally provides the food we eat. We consume the body of the deity in order to live. It is a continuous, cyclical sacrifice.
So death is not the enemy.
No, death is not the end of life. It is its necessary complement. It is the engine that keeps the cycle turning.
If we look closely at that, it sets up the absolute foundation for later religious sacraments. I mean, I am thinking of the Christian Eucharist. You literally consume the body and blood of the sacrificed deity to sustain your spiritual life.
The psychological underpinnings are identical. The agrarian mind recognizes that you are fundamentally composed of what you consume. And if what you consume is a gift from the earth, you are a walking manifestation of the earth's sacrifice.
This period was deeply connected to the cycles of the planet. Campbell details the animal symbolism of this era, which is fascinating. The pig, rooting deep in the dark earth, represents the labyrinth and the journey to the underworld.
Yes, a very sacred animal.
And the bird represents the spiritual muse, the transcendent, airy aspect of the goddess. The frog connects the watery, transformative womb to the solid earth. It sounds like a period of profound, cyclical harmony.
It was a worldview where humanity saw itself as an integral, harmonious part of nature's machinery. But unfortunately, this peaceful, cyclic golden age of the earth goddess was violently interrupted.
It was completely shattered, and not by a slow philosophical shift, but by physical force.
Precisely. It was shattered by forces originating from the harsh, unforgiving environments outside the fertile agrarian valleys, namely the deserts to the south and the icy steppes to the north.
This marks the devastating influx of the warrior gods. From the north came the Indo-Europeans, and from the south came the Semitic tribes. And we really have to understand the environment that forged these people.
Geography is destiny and myth.
Exactly. They were not patient farmers watching the seasons turn, trusting the earth to provide. They lived in harsh landscapes where the earth gave nothing freely. They were nomadic herders, warriors, conquerors.
And human beings create gods that reflect their reality. The gods of these nomadic warriors did not live in the earth. The earth was just dirt to be ridden over.
Right.
Their gods lived in the unapproachable, commanding sky. They were gods of sudden, terrifying power. They were lightning throwers. Zeus, Thor, Yahweh, Marduk.
Think about the metaphor there. It is like switching an entire society's operating system. The goddess operating system was open source. Everything was interconnected, fluid, emerging from the ground up.
That is a great analogy.
But the warrior god operating system is a strict top-down hierarchy. The administrator is in the sky, completely separate from the code, issuing commands downward.
And the clash of these two mythologies, the earth goddess and the sky god, literally shaped the modern world. When the Indo-Europeans arrived in the goddess-worshipping valleys of old Europe, they did not just slaughter everyone.
How did they integrate then?
Their method of assimilation was often mythological marriage. Their supreme male gods would marry the local agrarian goddesses.
So when we read Greek mythology and we see Zeus constantly transforming into swans or bulls to have affairs with local nymphs and queens, that isn't just a story about a promiscuous god.
Not at all.
That is the actual historical record of an invading patriarchal culture systematically co-opting the local female power centers.
Exactly. They subordinated the goddess by turning her into a wife or a conquest. It was a political merger expressed through myth. But the Semitic approach, originating from the southern deserts, was far more brutal and uncompromising.
The Babylonian creation myth is the starkest example of this. You have Marduk, the young, aggressive warrior god of the new patriarchal order. He confronts Tiamat, the great mother of the abyss, the primordial, chaotic ocean from which all life emerged.
He does not marry her. He does not negotiate with her. He slays her.
It is intensely violent.
It is. He catches her in a net, drives an evil wind into her mouth so she cannot close it, and shoots an arrow through her heart. Then he chops her massive body in half and uses her severed remains to construct the heavens and the earth.
The violence of that imagery is just staggering. The world is literally built from the murdered corpse of the mother.
The psychological damage of this shift cannot be overstated. In the goddess mythologies, humanity is a physical part of nature. We are born of the earth and return to it. We belong here. But in the patriarchal warrior mythologies, humanity is abruptly separated from God.
God is up there, we are down here.
Yes, God is in the sky, completely detached from the physical world.
And if God is separate from nature, and nature is made from the corpse of a slain monster, then nature is no longer a mother to be revered. Nature is a subjugated entity, something to be feared, dominated, controlled, or even considered inherently sinful.
The material world becomes fallen.
Exactly. The body itself becomes suspect.
You summarized it perfectly. We replace the organic cycle of the seasons, the natural rhythm of life and death, with a strict, inflexible rulebook of laws handed down from the sky. Compliance replaced harmony.
However, the goddess was not entirely obliterated everywhere. Campbell points out that in Egypt, for instance, the goddess remained a vital foundational force.
Yes, the myth of Isis and Osiris beautifully demonstrates this resilience. When Osiris, the king, is murdered and dismembered by his chaotic brother Set, it is not a male warrior who saves the day. It is Isis, his sister wife.
She is the active agent of salvation.
Completely. She tirelessly searches for his scattered pieces, reassembles his body, and uses her magic to resurrect him long enough to conceive their son, Horus.
And the imagery in Egypt is so literal. Isis is frequently depicted wearing a headdress shaped like a throne. She actually is the literal throne upon which the pharaoh sits.
His authority is entirely dependent on her foundation. He rules only because he sits upon the lap of the goddess. The masculine power is executive, sure, but the foundational legitimacy is entirely feminine.
But moving forward in history, this monumental clash of cultures, the earthbound goddess and the skybound warrior, eventually had to settle into a new paradigm. This synthesis occurred most famously in ancient Greece.
A fascinating era.
And this is where Campbell dives into the profound mathematical mysticism associated with the goddess, which completely surprised me.
The Greeks possessed a highly structured cosmology. They blended the deep mysticism of the older cultures with a new intellectual rigor. They recognized that the universe was not random, but governed by deep mathematical rhythms. And the number 9 became the mystic number of the goddess.
But why 9? I mean, what is the significance?
Well, it represents the 9 muses, who govern all inspiration and art. But it also reflects the fundamental rhythms of time and space, specifically the 9 months of human gestation.
Oh, tying it back to the biology of creation.
Exactly. But even more fascinating is the number 432.
Yes, Campbell highlights 432 as a cosmic number. He notes it appears in mythologies from Iceland all the way to India. But what is the mechanical explanation for that? Why 432?
It relates to the precession of the equinoxes. The ancients observed that the night sky slowly shifts over thousands of years. It takes roughly 25,920 years for the zodiac to complete one full cycle.
That is a massive scale of time to observe.
It shows their dedication to the cosmos. If you divide that great year by 60, which was a foundational number in ancient mathematics, you get exactly 432.
Wow.
It represents the grand, slow heartbeat of the universe itself. And its digits, 4 plus 3 plus 2, sum to 9, returning perfectly to the number of the goddess. The goddess became the mathematical boundary of reality itself.
That is beautiful. But even within this highly intellectual Greek synthesis, the tension between the patriarchal gods and the ancient goddess remained. It was not entirely resolved. And it is brilliantly, almost tragically illustrated by the myth of the Judgment of Paris.
It was one of the most misunderstood myths in Western culture, I would argue.
We all know the basic story. A golden apple is thrown into a banquet, inscribed, "For the fairest." 3 goddesses claim it: Hera, the queen of heaven; Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom; and Aphrodite, the goddess of love.
And they need a judge.
Right, they ask a mortal prince, Paris, to judge who's the most beautiful.
As the classicist Jane Ellen Harrison pointed out, this myth represents the ultimate humiliation of the goddess.
How so?
Because originally, before the patriarchal invasions, these were not 3 competing women. They were 3 aspects of the ultimate singular goddess: the mother, the virgin warrior, and the erotic impulse, all one being.
But the patriarchal mindset fragments her.
Exactly. It cannot handle the multifaceted power of the feminine, so it breaks her apart. It reduces her to competitors in a petty beauty contest judged by a mortal man.
But Campbell argues that on a deeper psychological level, Paris is not merely judging beauty. He is being forced to choose his Shakti. What does that term mean in this context?
Shakti is a Sanskrit term representing primal, activating life energy. It is the feminine power that animates the universe. So Paris is being forced to choose what will drive his life.
What his core motivation will be.
Yes. Will it be political power and domestic order, represented by Hera? Will it be intellectual victory and martial prowess, represented by Athena? Or will it be raw, erotic, romantic love, represented by Aphrodite?
He tries to avoid his destiny, doesn't he? He tries to refuse the choice, because choosing one path inevitably angers the primal forces of the others. But he is forced, and he chooses Aphrodite.
And that choice, prioritizing personal, erotic love over political and martial duty, leads directly to the Trojan War. Which brings us to the 2 foundational epics of Western literature, the texts that mapped the human psyche for centuries: Homer's Iliad and Odyssey.
Campbell's analysis of these 2 epics is an absolute revelation. The Iliad, which covers the Trojan War itself, is overwhelmingly masculine.
It is blood and iron.
Yes, it is entirely oriented around war, the clash of massive egos, anger, pride, and the brutal transition from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. It is fundamentally a textbook on how to achieve glory through violence.
But the Odyssey, the story of the journey home, is a profound shift. It is feminine in its entire orientation. It is a story of initiation, not conquest.
You mentioned Samuel Butler earlier, the 19th century scholar who proposed a fascinating theory about the Odyssey.
Yes, Butler argued that the Odyssey was actually written by a woman.
Which is a radical thought for classical studies.
Very much so. His evidence was its deep, nuanced understanding of domestic life, female psychology, and the undeniable fact that throughout his entire journey, Odysseus, the great warlord of Troy, is rendered completely dependent on feminine power. His sword is useless against the ocean.
He encounters 4 distinct, powerful aspects of the feminine on his journey. First, there's Circe. She represents the raw, unbridled, erotic impulse.
She's the magic that can turn men into swine. And Campbell notes she does not actually force them to become pigs. She merely provides the intoxicating environment, and their own base, undisciplined animal instincts do the rest.
So they reveal their true nature.
Exactly. If a man lacks spiritual discipline, the raw erotic power of the feminine will reduce him to an animal.
Then he meets Calypso. She represents the maternal, enclosing wife. She offers him literal immortality, a paradise on her island, but the price is stasis. He can never leave. He will be her eternal child husband.
It is a suffocating form of love. Next is Nausicaa, the young princess he meets on the beach when he washes ashore, naked and desperate.
She saves him.
She does. She is the virgin muse, the pure, unburdened inspiration that provides him with clothes, a ship, and sets him back on the path toward his true destination.
And finally, there is Penelope, his wife waiting in Ithaca. She represents fidelity, wisdom, and the ultimate initiation of the woman herself. She is holding her ground against the destructive, consuming forces of the suitors who are devouring her estate.
The Odyssey is fundamentally about Odysseus learning to surrender to the goddess. He must systematically surrender his arrogant, destructive warrior ego in order to survive the magical feminine realm of the ocean he finds himself trapped in.
It really feels like the Iliad is about how to die with glory, but the Odyssey is a desperate plea to learn how to actually live. We see this necessary ego death perfectly in the famous episode with the Cyclops.
It is the absolute turning point of his psychological journey. Odysseus is trapped in a cave by a monstrous one-eyed giant.
When the Cyclops asks his name, Odysseus, the great hero who conquered Troy, the man whose massive ego defined him, he answers, "I am nobody." He has to verbally and psychologically abandon his identity to survive.
And how does he physically escape the cave? He hides under the belly of a giant ram. He clings to the fleece and allows the animal to carry him out.
And the ram is significant.
The ram is the classic symbol of solar consciousness, of spiritual light. He aligns himself with a higher spiritual power and allows himself to be carried out of the darkness of the cave, which is really the darkness of his own monstrous ego.
This literary journey of ego death and rebirth in the Odyssey was not just a good story for entertainment. It laid the exact blueprint for the actual highly secretive religious practices of the ancient world.
We are entering the realm of the mysteries of transformation.
The mystery cults. The Eleusinian, Dionysian, and Orphic mysteries. These were the most strictly guarded secrets of antiquity. To reveal what happened inside the initiation chambers was punishable by death.
And we must ask, why the absolute secrecy? Why hide it so fiercely?
Why indeed?
Because their entire purpose was to induce a profound, undeniable spiritual awakening. They were designed to violently shift a person's focus away from their base animal needs and their societal ego and toward a higher universal spiritual existence. You cannot explain that to someone who hasn't experienced it. You have to put them through the ritual.
The central myth of the most famous of these, the Eleusinian mysteries, was the story of Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, and her daughter Persephone, who was abducted by Hades into the underworld. It is a myth of descent into darkness and the eventual return of light.
Right. And to understand the profound shift these mysteries represented, we must contrast their rituals with the standard religious practices of the time. The standard Greek religious practice, the Achaean sacrifice, was highly practical.
It was almost a community event.
Exactly. You slaughtered an animal, you burned the inedible bones and fat for the sky gods, and the community cooked and ate the meat. It was a barbecue. It was sharing a meal with the divine to ensure good weather or victory in battle.
But the ancient rites dedicated to the earth goddess within these mystery cults demanded something entirely different. They demanded a holocaust of a pig. Now, for a modern listener, that word carries a horrific historical weight. What did Holocaust mean to the ancient Greeks in this specific context?
The word literally translates to wholly burned. In these rituals, an entire pig, the animal sacred to the earth, was slaughtered and burned to ashes.
Nothing was left.
Nothing was eaten, nothing was saved. The entire physical sustenance of the animal was given completely back to the earth. It was a total, unmitigated surrender of physical need for the sake of spiritual purity. It communicated that the spiritual life required total sacrifice of the animal nature.
And then there is Dionysus, the god of wine, who is intrinsically linked to the divine feminine in these mystery traditions. He is a male god, but he is driven by the Maenads, wild, ecstatic women.
Dionysus represents the absolute ecstasy of immediate, raw experience over rigid, patriarchal dogma. The mysteries were not about believing in a doctrine written on a scroll. They were about experiencing the divine directly, feeling it course through your veins like wine.
Campbell highlights a beautiful classical Greek kylix vase that depicts this initiation process. It shows the hero Peleus and the sea nymph Thetis.
Thetis is the initiator. She holds Peleus in a firm grip, wrestling him into submission. But if you look closely at their hands, they are positioned in a yin-yang gesture.
One hand up, one hand down. What does that signify to the initiate?
It symbolizes the transcendence of binary oppositions. We live our lives trapped in binaries. Good and evil, male and female, life and death, success and failure. The initiation teaches that to reach true enlightenment, one must accept both the dark and the light. You cannot cling only to the good. You must embrace the entirety of the cosmic cycle.
This realization is further symbolized by the divine twins, Castor and Pollux. One is born mortal, one is born immortal.
And the initiate realizes that they themselves are the twins. They are simultaneously a mortal physical being that will die and an immortal spiritual entity that will endure. Furthermore, they realize that on a spiritual level, beyond the biology of the body, the soul is entirely androgynous. It contains both the masculine and the feminine principles perfectly balanced.
It is the alchemy of the soul. These ancient cults were practicing the exact same spiritual transformation that later defined global mysticism, turning the heavy, reactive lead of human suffering and animal instinct into the pure, reflective gold of cosmic awareness.
The symbols map perfectly onto later traditions. The wheat of Demeter and the wine of Dionysus, used in the classical mysteries, map perfectly onto the later Christian themes of the Eucharist, the bread and the wine.
It is the exact same underlying mechanism.
Yes. The descent into the underworld mirrors the resurrection. The ultimate goal across all these traditions is to willingly offer up our earthly attachments to be consumed by spiritual light.
But history is rarely a straight line. As the ancient world fell to strict, massive religious orthodoxies, first the Roman Empire, then the institutional church, the expansive, nature-bound goddess was forcefully pushed out of sight.
The patriarchal structures tried to bury her entirely.
Right. God became exclusively male, entirely remote, and heavily focused on law and punishment.
Yet, the psychological need for the feminine principle cannot be legislated out of existence. She refused to stay hidden, and she re-emerged centuries later in the most unexpected place imaginable: the heavily fortified patriarchal medieval courts of Europe.
During the Middle Ages, we witness a massive, unstoppable resurgence of the divine feminine. God the Father had become so remote, so terrifying and unapproachable in his judgment that humanity desperately needed a mediator. They needed a mother.
And the church had to adapt to this psychological pressure. In 431 AD, at the Council of Ephesus, the church officially declared the Virgin Mary as the Theotokos, the God-bearer, the Mother of God.
She was elevated.
She was. She became the compassionate, merciful bridge between a sinful, suffering humanity and an absolute, terrifyingly perfect God.
But while the church elevated Mary as the pure, obedient virgin, the true, radical rebellion happened outside the church. It happened in the explosive birth of courtly love among the troubadours of Europe.
We often misunderstand courtly love as just men writing pretty poems to women. It was not. It was a radical, dangerous philosophical movement.
Take the famous story of Tristan and Isolde. It is the ultimate tale of a love that completely defies all societal rules, political alliances, and even the holy sacrament of arranged marriage. Isolde is meant to marry King Mark, to seal a political treaty.
A standard political arrangement for the time.
But she and Tristan drink a love potion, symbolizing the uncontrollable force of nature, and fall hopelessly in love.
Their love is a direct threat to the stability of the kingdom, so they flee. They create the Cave of Lovers, a secret sanctuary deep in the wild forest.
And Campbell points out that this cave is not just a hiding spot. It is a direct descendant of the Paleolithic womb caves and the Celtic mystery sanctuaries.
Inside this cave, love itself is the highest sacrament. They do not need a priest. They do not need a king's permission. The pure, authentic connection between their souls bypasses the authority of the church and the state entirely.
It created an unbearable tension between natural law and societal law. Natural law is represented by the ancient power of the goddess, the undeniable force of true romantic love. Societal law is represented by God the Father, the King, the patriarchy, the rules of inheritance and marriage.
Following the path of natural love, following your heart against the dictates of society, became known in esoteric traditions as taking the left-hand path.
The left-hand path, it sounds sinister today.
Well, it was considered heretical by the authorities. The right hand was the hand of the king, the hand of the law, the hand that swore oaths to the state. The left hand is the side of the heart. To follow it was dangerous. It required immense courage.
We see this danger brilliantly encoded in the Arthurian legends, specifically the story of Lancelot's sword bridge. Lancelot loves Queen Guinevere. She belongs to his king, Arthur. She is abducted, and to rescue her, Lancelot must cross a chasm. But the bridge is not made of stone.
No, he must walk barefoot over the razor-sharp edge of a giant, gleaming sword spanning the abyss. His hands and feet are sliced to the bone.
This harrowing, agonizing physical journey is the precise psychological metaphor for the path a person must take when they choose to follow the authentic truth of their own heart, rather than the safe prescribed path of society.
It is not a gentle stroll.
No. It requires enduring immense pain, social ostracization, and the terrifying prospect of losing everything you thought secured your identity.
But the goddess, this principle of natural truth, was infiltrating the highest levels of European thought. You even see it explicitly painted in the Vatican.
This detail completely blew my mind. In the Borgia apartments, commissioned by Pope Alexander VI in the late 15th century, there's a painting by the master Pinturicchio. It shows the Egyptian goddess Isis, and she is instructing both Moses, the lawgiver of the Bible, and Hermes Trismegistus, the legendary figure of classical mystical wisdom.
The message painted on the walls of the Vatican is astounding. The ancient goddess of nature, the feminine principle, is the supreme original teacher of both biblical law and classical wisdom. They all originate from her.
And you see this synthesis in Albrecht Dürer's famous engraving of the crucifixion. He places the sun and the moon united in the sky directly above the dying Christ.
He is signaling the ultimate mystical union. The masculine and feminine consciousness, the active and the receptive, the light and the dark, are finally brought into perfect balance at the moment of supreme spiritual sacrifice.
The European Romance tradition was the ultimate rebellion of the human spirit. It declared, unequivocally, that individual natural love, the eternal feminine principle, was a higher, more sacred spiritual calling than tribal duty, political convenience, or arranged marriages.
It asserted that the individual soul is sacred, and its natural inclinations are a compass pointing toward the divine.
Think about the dating apps on your phone right now. Think about the movies you watch, the songs you listen to. When you obsess over finding your soulmate or true love, when you prioritize a genuine emotional connection over marrying someone who just looks good on a resume, you are actually, subconsciously, participating in the ancient worship of the goddess of nature.
You are.
You are prioritizing her natural law, the left-hand path, over the practical societal laws of the modern world.
It is the operating system running beneath the surface of our entire romantic culture. And this brings us to the ultimate necessary realization of what Joseph Campbell and the brilliant archaeologist he relied upon, Maria Gimbutas, were trying to tell us about the trajectory of our future.
We have taken a massive journey today. We started in the terrifying, sensory-deprived, womb-like caves of the Paleolithic hunters, where we first learned to separate spirit from biology. We watched the goddess rise to supreme, unquestioned power as the earth provided the first agricultural harvests.
A true golden age.
We witnessed her violent, traumatic subjugation by the sky gods of nomadic warriors who built the world from her corpse. We saw her fragmented in Greece, hidden in the pitch-black rituals of the secret mystery cults, and finally resurrecting in the passionate, bloody, rebellious romances of the Middle Ages.
And we must conclude with the powerful, unyielding assertion made by Campbell and Gimbutas in the final analysis of this material. This is not just an interesting history lesson. For 5,000 years, humanity has been trapped in a historical nightmare.
A
nightmare of patriarchal dominance. It has been characterized by endless war, the brutal pursuit of national and tribal interests, the rigid enforcement of top-down dogma, and the systematic, disastrous subjugation of the natural world.
The rediscovery of the goddess, the unearthing of these ancient, wide-hipped clay figurines in Anatolia and the Balkans, is not just a neat piece of archaeological trivia for a museum display. It is an urgent, screaming, global necessity.
We have to pay attention to it.
It is a vital, existential call to wake up from this 5-millennium nightmare.
We are rapidly approaching the limits of the warrior god operating system. The Earth simply cannot sustain infinite extraction. We are being asked, required, to return to a state of harmony with the creative, organic energies of nature. We must deeply recognize the divine feminine that lives within the psyche of every single human being, regardless of gender.
It is universal.
Compassion, intuition, cyclical awareness, the recognition that life feeds on life and requires reverence. These are not weaknesses. They are survival skills.
The survival of our species and the psychological wholeness of our individual lives depends entirely on integrating this lost half of our spiritual heritage. We must learn to honor the earth not as a resource to be plundered, but as a mother to be revered.
We have to stop trying to manage the machine and remember how to participate in the cycle.
I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought. Look at the structures of your own life. If the ancient goddess represents the boundless, organic, uncontrollable reality of the universe, the truth of your own body and heart and the warrior gods represent our strict, rigid, man-made societal rules and corporate hierarchies, how much of your daily anxiety comes from mistaking the manufactured rules of your society for the absolute laws of nature?
A profound question.
Are you judging your worth by a scoreboard that completely ignores the reality of your soul? Are you trying to win a game that requires you to chop yourself into pieces? Are you ready to wake up? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the structures around you, keep learning from the deep past, and remember to honor the eternal feminine that quietly, persistently leads us all onward.